Jake Morrison hated the council chambers. He had been coming here for 5 years now, and every visit felt the same. The massive circular room was built to make humans feel small. The ceiling stretched up so high that clouds sometimes formed near the top. The seats were designed for species much larger than humans, forcing Jake and his team to sit in chairs that made them look like children. Today was worse than usual. Jake sat next to Dr. Linda Hayes, who was reviewing her notes one more time. Linda had been Earth's chief diplomat for almost 20 years. She was smart, patient, and had more experience with aliens than anyone else on Earth. But even she looked tired today. "They're going to say no again," Jake whispered to her. Linda didn't look up from her papers, probably, but we have to try. The Galactic Council had 47 member species. Most of them didn't care about humanity one way or another. They voted however the Vakari Empire told them to vote. And the Vakari had made it very clear that they thought humans were nothing special. The session began with the usual ceremonies. Species after species stood to discuss trade routes, mining rights, and diplomatic agreements. Finally, after 3 hours of waiting, it was Earth's turn. Linda stood and walked to the center platform. Her voice was calm and professional as she spoke. "Honored Council members, Earth renews its request for mining rights in the outer spiral region. We have submitted all required documentation. Our surveys show that the asteroids in question are unclaimed and rich in resources that would benefit not just humanity, but many species through increased trade." The Vakari ambassador didn't even wait for Linda to finish sitting down. He rose from his seat, his 4 eyes focused on the human delegation with obvious contempt. The Vakari were tall, nearly 3 meters high, with thick gray skin and a bearing that suggested they had ruled the galaxy since the beginning of time. In truth, they had only been in power for about 8,000 years, but that was still much longer than humanity had been traveling in space. "The Council has reviewed Earth's request," the ambassador said, his voice booming through the chamber, "and we find it premature and frankly laughable." Jake felt his hands clench into fists under the table. Beside him, Linda remained perfectly still, but he could see the muscle in her jaw tighten. The Vakari continued. "Humanity has been part of the galactic community for barely 200 years. You lack the technology for large-scale mining operations. You lack the wisdom to manage such resources properly, and quite frankly, you lack the evolutionary refinement to deserve such privileges." Other council members nodded in agreement. A few species that were usually neutral stayed quiet, which meant they wouldn't oppose the Vakari decision. "Your species has contributed nothing of value to galactic civilization," the ambassador went on. "You bring no unique technology, no art worth preserving, no philosophy that hasn't been explored by elder races millions of years ago. You are newcomers who should be grateful we allow you to exist in our space at all." Linda stood again. Her voice was steady, but Jake could hear the edge beneath it. "Ambassador, humanity has followed every rule. We have paid every fee. We have waited patiently for 2 centuries, while other species with far less experience than us have been granted rights that we are denied. We are simply asking for the same opportunities that others receive." The Vakari ambassador made a sound that might have been laughter. "Other species have earned their place. You have not." Request denied. The vote was called. 42 species voted with the Vakari. 3 abstained. Only 2 voted in Earth's favor, and those were small species that had no real power in the council. Linda gathered her papers without a word. Jake followed her out of the chambers, his anger building with every step. They had prepared for months for this presentation. They had evidence that the outer spiral asteroids were unclaimed. They had agreements with species willing to trade with them. None of it mattered. In the shuttle back to the human embassy, Linda finally spoke. "Send the full report to Earth. Let President Cross know what happened." "What's the point?" Jake asked bitterly. "He already knows what they'll say. We all do." Linda looked at him, and for the first time he saw real anger in her eyes. "Send the report anyway. Every insult. Every dismissal. Every time they treat us like we're nothing. I want it all documented." Back on Earth, President Daniel Cross watched the council session from his office in Geneva. He had seen this pattern before. Hell, he had lived it for most of his political career. Earth asked for something reasonable. The council said no. Earth asked again, more politely. The council said no again, with added insults this time. It was a game. The elder species liked to remind the younger ones of their place. They enjoyed showing off their power. For 200 years, humanity had played along, believing that patience and diplomacy would eventually work. Cross was done believing that. He called an emergency meeting with his top advisors. The heads of every major nation appeared on the screens around his desk. They all looked as angry as he felt. "You all saw what happened today," Cross said without preamble. "The Vicari called us evolutionary inferiors again. They denied our mining rights. Again. They made it clear that they will never treat us as equals. We could file a formal complaint," suggested the European Union. "Representative to who?" Cross asked. "The Council. They are the ones insulting us. The Vicari control 40 votes. We can't win through their system. What are you suggesting?" asked the Asian coalition leader. Cross leaned forward. "I'm suggesting we stop playing their game. We've been asking permission to exist in this galaxy for 2 centuries. I'm done asking. We need to make a statement, something they can't ignore, something that makes it clear we won't be pushed around anymore." "What kind of statement?" someone asked. Cross smiled, but there was no humor in it. "The kind that gets their attention? I'm bringing in some people who think differently. Scientists, engineers, strategists who aren't afraid to consider options outside the normal diplomatic channels. Give me 3 months to put together a proposal. If you don't like it, we'll continue as we have been. But if you do like it, we're going to change everything," the other leaders agreed, mostly because they didn't have any better ideas. 2 weeks later, a scientist named Dr. Peter Grant received an unusual message. He was asked to come to Geneva for a classified meeting about a new space project. Peter was an astrophysicist who specialized in large-scale engineering. He had published papers about moving asteroids and building massive structures in space. Most people thought his ideas were impossible or crazy. President Cross thought they were exactly what humanity needed. When Peter arrived in Geneva, he found himself in a room with 50 other people. Engineers, military officers, physicists, chemists, and even a few artists and psychologists. Cross walked in and got straight to the point. "Everyone in this room was chosen because you think big. I want you to design something for me. Something that will make the Galactic Council understand that humanity is not going to be dismissed anymore. I don't want weapons. I don't want war. I want a statement. A monument. Something so big and so unmistakable that every species in the galaxy will know exactly how we feel about being treated like children." Peter raised his hand. "How big are you talking, Mr. President?" Cross smiled. "How big can you build?" Peter thought for a moment, then pulled out his tablet and started sketching. "Well, theoretically, if we used a small planet as the base material, reinforced it properly, and installed the right propulsion and stabilization systems, we could build something visible from several light years away." "Good," Cross said. "Make it something they'll remember. Something with a clear message," Peter grinned. He was starting to understand what the president wanted. "I think I have an idea, but you might think it's too aggressive." "Try me," Cross said. Peter turned his tablet around to show his sketch. Several people gasped. A few started laughing. One general covered her mouth, her eyes wide with shock and delight. President Cross looked at the design for a long moment. Then he started to laugh too. It was a deep, genuine laugh that filled the room. "Dr. Grant," he said finally, "how soon can you start?" 3 months after the humiliating council session, President Cross stood before the most powerful people on Earth. The meeting room in Geneva was filled with presidents, prime ministers, military commanders, and scientific leaders from every major nation. What Cross was about to propose would require all of them to work together in ways they never had before. "Thank you all for coming," Cross began. "What I'm about to show you is classified at the highest level. Before we begin, I need everyone to understand that this project will change how the galaxy sees us. It will either establish us as a force to be respected, or it will make us the biggest laughingstock in galactic history." He pressed a button, and the massive screen behind him lit up. The image showed a blueprint of something enormous. It took several seconds for people to understand what they were looking at. When they did, the reactions ranged from shocked silence to surprised laughter. "Is that what I think it is?" asked General Lisa Webb, commander of Earth's Defense Forces. Dr. Peter Grant stood up, adjusting his glasses nervously. "Yes, General. It's a middle finger. A planetary-scale middle finger, to be precise." The room erupted in confused chatter. Cross let them talk for a minute before calling for silence. Peter continued his presentation. The structure would be carved from dwarf planet KR-229, which is located at the edge of our explored territory. The planet is roughly 1,500 kilometers in diameter, which gives us enough material to work with. We would hollow out sections, reinforce the structure with compressed titanium and carbon composites, and shape the exterior into the desired form. A giant middle finger pointed at the Galactic Council, someone said. "You can't be serious." "Completely serious," Cross replied. "For 200 years we've tried polite requests. We've tried formal complaints. We've tried following every single one of their rules. Nothing works. They see us as primitive children who should be grateful for any scraps they throw our way. I'm proposing we send them a message they can't misinterpret." Peter pulled up more detailed schematics. The structure would be positioned in the main shipping lane that the Council uses to reach our system. Every ship coming to or from Earth would pass it. We would install a fusion reactor in the core, making it bright enough to see from light years away. It would be impossible to miss. "How long would this take?" asked the Chinese premier. "With current technology and full international cooperation, we estimate 15 years, Peter answered. "Make it 10, Cross said firmly. "I want this completed while I'm still in office to see it." "Mr. President, that would require dedicating enormous resources," said the European Union leader. "We're talking about thousands of workers, hundreds of ships, and a significant portion of our industrial capacity." "I'm aware of the cost," Cross said. "But ask yourself this question. What is the cost of continuing to be treated like we don't matter? What is the cost of our children and grandchildren still being denied basic rights in this galaxy because we're considered too young, too primitive, too inferior?" The room went quiet. Everyone there had experienced the Council's condescension. Everyone had heard the insults, seen the dismissive gestures, felt the anger of being treated as less than equal. "This is insane," muttered the Brazilian president, but he was smiling when he said it. General Webb stood up. "I have a question. When the Council discovers what we're building, they'll send ships to investigate. They might try to stop us. What's our response?" "We defend the construction site," Cross said simply. "This will be in human sovereign space. We have every right to build whatever we want there. If they want to start a war over it, that's their choice." "You're gambling that they won't want open conflict," Webb said. "I'm counting on it," Cross agreed. "The Vicari are arrogant, but they're not stupid. They know we've been building up our military. A war with humanity would be costly, even if they won. And for what? To stop us from building a monument? It's not worth it to them." Peter brought up another image showing the proposed location. "By positioning it in the shipping lane, we make it their problem. They can avoid our territory entirely, which adds weeks to their trade routes, or they can pass by our monument every single time they visit this sector. Either way, they'll think about us." "What about other species?" someone asked. "Won't this offend everyone?" Linda Hayes, who had been quiet until now, finally spoke. "Some species will be offended, but I've been working in galactic diplomacy for 20 years. I can tell you that there are dozens of species who are just as frustrated with the Council as we are. They've been too afraid to speak up because the Vicari control so much power. This might give them courage to stand with us. Or it might unite the whole galaxy against us," someone countered. "That's a risk," Cross admitted. "But doing nothing is also a risk. If we continue as we are, nothing will change, ever. We'll be second-class citizens in this galaxy forever. I'm not willing to accept that." The debate went on for hours. Some leaders were enthusiastic. Others were worried. A few thought the whole idea was too dangerous, but slowly Cross won them over. Not by arguing that the plan was safe or easy, but by making them face the truth. Diplomacy had failed, and would continue to fail unless humanity did something dramatic. Finally, a vote was called. The result was almost unanimous. Operation Resolute was approved. The next phase was finding the right people for the job. Peter needed engineers who could work in deep space for years at a time. He needed miners who could carve through solid rock with precision. He needed physicists who could design a fusion reactor powerful enough to light up a small planet. Chief Engineer Karen Price was one of the first people recruited. She had spent 15 years building space stations in Earth orbit and had a reputation for solving impossible problems. When Peter explained what he needed, she laughed so hard she cried. "You want me to carve a dwarf planet into a hand flipping off the galaxy?" she asked, wiping her eyes. That's the best engineering project I've ever heard of. Karen assembled her team carefully. She chose people who were skilled but also had a sense of humor about the whole thing. This project would take years, and everyone involved needed to understand the spirit behind it. This wasn't just about engineering. It was about dignity. The public announcement was carefully crafted. President Cross went on every major news network to explain that humanity was beginning a massive deep space engineering project. He talked about mining operations, industrial development, and scientific research. Everything he said was technically true. He just didn't mention what shape the project would take. Most people on Earth were excited. Finally, their government was doing something big, something that showed confidence and ambition. A few conspiracy theorists suspected there was more to the story, but no one guessed the truth. The first ships departed for KR-229 6 months after the Geneva meeting. They carried drilling equipment, construction materials, and the first wave of workers. Karen Price was on the lead vessel reviewing her plans one more time. "You nervous?" asked her assistant, a young engineer named Danny Cole. Karen shook her head. "Nervous? No excited? Absolutely. We're about to build something that people will talk about for centuries." "If it works," Danny said. "It'll work," Karen said confidently. "I've checked the math 100 times. The real question is whether we can finish before someone figures out what we're doing." That someone turned out to be a Vicari scout ship that passed through the area about 8 months into construction. The ship's sensors detected unusual activity around KR-229 and moved in to investigate. Admiral Jake Morrison, now commanding Earth's defense fleet in that sector, received the alert immediately. He ordered his ships to intercept. The two fleets met in space between KR-229 and the edge of the system. Jake's force consisted of 20 human warships, newly built and equipped with the latest weapons technology. The Vicari had sent only 3 ships, clearly not expecting resistance. Jake opened a communication channel. His voice was calm but firm. "Vicari vessel, you are approaching human sovereign territory. State your business or turn back." The Vicari captain appeared on screen, his 4 eyes narrowing. "We detected unusual construction activity. We are investigating." "There's nothing to investigate," Jake replied. "We're conducting mining and engineering operations in our own territory. This doesn't concern the Council." "Everything in this sector concerns the Council," the Vicari captain said arrogantly. "We will approach and inspect your operation." Jake's expression didn't change. "No, you won't. Turn back now or we will consider your approach an act of aggression." The Vicari captain seemed shocked. Humanity had never refused a Council inspection before. "You dare threaten us?" "I'm not threatening," Jake said calmly. "I'm informing you of our position. This is human space. We have every right to conduct operations here without Council oversight. Leave now." There was a long pause. The Vicari captain was clearly trying to decide if humans were bluffing. He looked at his sensors, which showed him that the human fleet was well armed and in a defensive formation. A fight here would be costly, even if the Vicari won. "The Council will hear about this," the captain finally said. "Good," Jake replied. "Make sure you tell them we said hello." The Vicari ships turned and left. Jake watched them go, then smiled to himself. Let them report back. 5 years after the monument's activation, the galaxy looked very different. The Free Trade Coalition had grown to 42 member species, controlling nearly half of all interstellar commerce. The Galactic Council still existed, but its power had faded significantly. Species that had once feared Vicari retaliation now openly ignored Council directives. President Helen Martinez, who had succeeded Daniel Cross 2 years earlier, stood on the platform at New Geneva, preparing to give the most important speech of her administration. The Vicari had finally requested formal negotiations, not demands, not ultimatums, actual negotiations between equals. It had taken 5 years, but the message had finally gotten through. Linda Hayes, now Earth's Secretary of Interstellar Affairs, waited at the landing platform as the Vicari diplomatic vessel descended. She felt strange about this moment. After spending 20 years being dismissed by the Vicari, watching them arrive to ask for talks felt surreal. The vessel's door opened, and Ambassador Senna stepped out. She had risen quickly in Vicari politics, partly because she had been one of the first to understand that the old ways weren't working anymore. She approached Linda with what might have been respect in her posture. "Secretary Hayes, Senna said formally. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with us." "Ambassador Senna," Linda replied, keeping her voice neutral. "Welcome to Earth." They walked together to the conference building, making small talk about the weather and the journey. But both knew the real conversation would be much more difficult. The conference room was filled with representatives from 20 species. The Free Trade Coalition had insisted on open negotiations rather than private talks. Everything would be recorded and shared publicly. No secret deals, no backroom agreements. If the Vakari wanted to be part of the new order, they had to accept transparency. President Martinez opened the session. "Ambassador Senna, you requested this meeting. Please state your purpose." Senna stood, her 4 eyes scanning the room. "The Vakari Empire wishes to discuss membership in the Free Trade Coalition. We recognize that the galaxy has changed. Our old methods of governance are no longer effective. We would like to join the coalition and contribute to its growth." There was silence in the room. Several species looked shocked. The Vakari, who had controlled galactic politics for 8,000 years, were asking to join an organization they had once called illegitimate. Martinez didn't show any surprise. She had been briefed that this request was coming. "Membership in the coalition requires accepting our charter. All members have equal voting rights regardless of age, size, or military power. All members contribute fairly to collective defense and trade regulation. All members respect the sovereignty of others." "Can the Vakari Empire accept these terms?" "We can," Senna said. "But we request clarification on one point. The monument that humanity built, will it remain in place?" Martinez smiled slightly. "The monument stands in human sovereign territory. What we do with it is our decision alone. However, I can tell you that we have no plans to remove it. It serves as a useful reminder." "A reminder of what?" asked the Tarathi representative, sounding amused. "That respect is earned, not given," Martinez said. "That no species has the right to dominate others just because they're older or stronger. And that sometimes when words don't work, you need to make a statement that nobody can ignore." Senna's 4 eyes blinked in what might have been acknowledgement. "That is acceptable. The monument has become, in an odd way, a part of our culture now. Our children see it in the sky and ask why it's there. We tell them it's a reminder that arrogance has consequences." The negotiations continued for 3 days. The terms were discussed, debated, and refined. The Vakari delegation asked for nothing special, no exceptions or privileges. They were willing to join as equals, which was something nobody had expected just a few years earlier. On the 3rd day, the treaty was signed. The Vakari Empire became the 43rd member of the Free Trade Coalition. The Galactic Council, which had lost most of its members by now, formally dissolved itself the following week. 8,000 years of Vakari dominance had ended, not with war or rebellion, but with a simple acknowledgement that times had changed. Jake Morrison, now retired from active military service, had been appointed as the monument's official curator. It was a ceremonial position mostly, but it came with a comfortable office and a nice view. He spent his days giving tours to visitors from across the galaxy and maintaining the monument systems. Today's tour group included a class of young Vakari students. They stood on the observation deck, their multiple eyes fixed on the glowing structure. "Why did humans build this?" one young Vakari asked Jake. "Because we were tired of being treated like we didn't matter," Jake explained. "For 200 years, we tried to earn respect through patience and diplomacy. It didn't work. So we decided to make a statement that everyone would understand." "But it's rude," another student said. "Yes," Jake agreed. "Very rude." That was the point. Sometimes being polite doesn't work. Sometimes you need to be loud and clear about how you feel. "Do you regret it?" asked their teacher, an older Vakari with graying skin. Jake thought about the question seriously. "No, this monument changed everything. Before it was built, humanity was ignored and dismissed. After it was activated, the galaxy had to pay attention to us. It led to the Free Trade Coalition, which has been good for everyone, even your people. So no, I don't regret it." The teacher nodded slowly. "We teach our children about this monument now. We tell them it represents the cost of arrogance. My generation thought we ruled the galaxy because we deserved to. We believed our age and experience made us superior. Your monument forced us to confront that lie. Does it bother you?" Jake asked. "Seeing it there every time you look at the sky?" The teacher was quiet for a moment. "At first, yes. It felt like an insult. But now, I think it serves a purpose. It reminds us to listen to younger species, to respect others even when they're different from us, to remember that we're not as wise as we thought we were. Back on Earth, Peter Grant was giving a lecture at the Global Engineering Institute. He was old now, his hair white and his hands shaky, but his mind was still sharp. Students packed the auditorium to hear him speak about the monument's design and construction. Many people ask me if I regret making it so crude, Peter said. They wonder if we should have built something more diplomatic, more artistic. My answer is always the same. The monument's design was perfect for its purpose. It had to be unmistakable. It had to be impossible to misinterpret. A beautiful statue could be ignored or explained away, but a 3,000-kilometer middle finger? Nobody can pretend they don't understand what that means. A student raised her hand. Professor Grant, do you think the monument would have worked if humanity wasn't prepared to defend it? Peter smiled. Excellent question. No, I don't think it would have. The monument itself was just a symbol. What made it powerful was humanity's willingness to stand behind it. When the Vicari sent fleets to intimidate us, we didn't back down. When they threatened economic sanctions, we built alternative trade networks. The monument was our statement, but our actions proved we meant it. Karen Price, also retired now, spent her time consulting on new space projects. Every nation wanted her expertise after she had successfully managed the most complex engineering project in human history. But she always made time to visit the monument at least once a year. This year she brought her granddaughter, a bright 12-year-old named Emma, who wanted to be an engineer just like her grandmother. It's even bigger than I thought, Emma said, staring at the monument through the observation window. 3,247 kilometers from base to tip, Karen said. Every centimeter was planned and measured. Every support beam was calculated. Every system was tested. It took 10 years and thousands of people to build. Was it worth it, Grandma? Karen looked at the glowing structure, thinking about all the work, all the challenges, all the moments when she wasn't sure they could actually do it. Then she thought about how the galaxy had changed, how humanity was respected now, how other species felt empowered to stand up for themselves. Yes, she said firmly, it was worth it. The monument had become more than just a symbol of human defiance. Tourist ships from across the galaxy visited it daily. Some species came to admire the engineering. Others came to see the monument that had changed galactic politics. A few came simply because it made them laugh. A small industry had grown up around it. Hotels and restaurants on the construction platform, which had been converted into a proper space station. Gift shops selling miniature replicas. Tour guides explaining the history. The most popular spot was a viewing platform where visitors could take pictures with the monument in the background. Species from all over the galaxy posed there, often making the same gesture with their own appendages, whatever those might be. I never imagined this when we started. Danny Cole told Sophie Turner as they watched a group of million insects carefully position their foreleg in imitation of the monument's gesture. Sophie laughed. I think President Cross would have loved this. He wanted to make a statement. He got that, and more. Daniel Cross had passed away 2 years after leaving office, but not before seeing the treaty with the Vicari signed. The activation ceremony was scheduled for exactly 10 years after construction began. President Daniel Cross, now in his 70s but still sharp and determined, traveled to the construction platform to personally oversee the event. Thousands of workers who had spent years building the monument gathered to watch. Billions more across human space and throughout the galaxy tuned in to witness history. Karen Price stood beside Cross on the observation deck, feeling a mix of pride and nervousness. The monument was complete. The fusion reactor was ready. Everything had been tested and retested. But this was still the moment of truth. Nervous? Cross asked her quietly. A little, Karen admitted. We've put 10 years of work into this. If something goes wrong now, it'll be embarrassing. Cross smiled. If something goes wrong, we'll fix it and try again. But I have faith in your work, Chief Engineer. You've never let us down. The ceremony began with Cross's speech. He stood before the cameras, with the monument visible through the viewport behind him. His voice was steady and clear as he spoke. For 200 years, humanity has asked for a place in this galaxy. We've asked politely. We've followed the rules. We've tried to earn respect through patience and diplomacy. Today, we stop asking. He paused, letting his words sink in. This monument represents humanity's answer to those who would keep us in our place. It stands as a reminder that we will not be dismissed, we will not be forgotten, and we will never, ever kneel before those who think they're better than us just because they're older. Cross gestured toward the monument. Let this beacon shine across the galaxy. Let it remind the powerful that respect cannot be demanded. It must be earned. And if you refuse to give it freely, then sometimes we have to take it. He turned to Karen and nodded. Chief Engineer Price, you may activate the reactor. Karen walked to the control panel, her hand hovering over the activation switch. She thought about all the work that had gone into this moment, the thousands of people who had spent years away from their families, the resources Earth had poured into the project, the political risks President Cross had taken. She pressed the switch. Deep inside the monument, the fusion reactor came to life. Energy surged through the carefully designed systems, flowing into the illumination grid that covered the monument's surface. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then the monument began to glow. Softly at first, then brighter and brighter until it blazed like a small star. The light was pure white, intense enough to be visible from dozens of light years away. Against the darkness of space, the massive middle finger shone defiantly, impossible to miss or ignore. The observation deck erupted in cheers. Workers hugged each other, crying and laughing at the same time. 10 years of effort had paid off. The monument was perfect. Cross stood at the viewport, watching the light spread. He felt a sense of satisfaction, deeper than anything he had experienced in his long political career. This was his legacy. Not laws or treaties or political victories, but this simple, crude, beautiful statement that humanity would not be pushed around anymore. The reaction from the Galactic Council was immediate and explosive. Within hours, Ambassador Vekatar himself appeared on every major communication channel. His 4 eyes were wide with rage, his voice shaking with fury. This is an outrage, an insult to the entire civilized galaxy. Earth has committed an act of aggression against the dignity of all species. There will be consequences. But his threats rang hollow. What could the Council actually do? The monument stood in human territory. It wasn't a weapon. It wasn't blocking trade routes, though ships would have to pass it to reach Earth's system. It was simply a statement, crude but effective. More importantly, not everyone agreed with the Vicari's outrage. Within a day of the activation, the Tarathi government issued a formal statement. They praised the monument as a bold artistic expression and announced they were withdrawing from several council committees. The Million Collective went further. They sent a diplomatic mission to Earth, requesting talks about forming a new trade alliance outside council control. A dozen smaller species contacted Earth with similar messages. They had been waiting for someone to stand up to the Vicari. Humanity's monument gave them the courage to do it themselves. Jake Morrison watched all this from his flagship, which was now on permanent patrol around the monument. His job was to protect it from anyone who might try to sabotage or destroy it. So far, no one had been that foolish. Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from a Vicari diplomatic vessel, his communications officer reported. They're requesting permission to approach the monument. Jake raised an eyebrow. Diplomatic vessel? Are we sure? Confirmed, sir. 1 ship, minimal weapons, and they're broadcasting diplomatic codes. Let them approach, but keep weapons ready. If they try anything, I want them disabled before they can fire a shot. The Vicari ship came closer, moving slowly and carefully. When it was within visual range, Jake received a personal communication request. He accepted, and found himself looking at a younger Vicari he didn't recognize. I am Senna, Junior Ambassador of the Vicari Diplomatic Corps, the alien said. I request permission to view your monument up close. You're looking at it, Jake replied. That's as close as you need to be. Please, Admiral, I come with no hostile intent. I simply wish to see it clearly. My government is very angry, as you know. I need to understand what has made them so upset. Jake studied the young ambassador. She seemed genuine, and her ship was definitely not a threat. Fine. You can come aboard my flagship. We'll view it together. Senna arrived an hour later, escorted by Jake's security team. He led her to the observation deck, where the monument filled the viewport, blazing with light. The Vicari ambassador stood in silence for a long moment, all four of her eyes fixed on the structure. Finally, she spoke. It's visible from our homeworld, you know. Every night when our planet rotates toward this sector, we can see it. A bright point of light in the constellation our people call the Hunter. Except now everyone knows what that light really is. Good, Jake said without sympathy. That's exactly the point. Senna turned to look at him. My people are proud. We have led the Council for 8,000 years. We've seen countless species rise and fall. We've made mistakes, yes, but we've also maintained order in this part of the galaxy. And now, every time we look at the sky, we see this. A reminder that humanity thinks we're nothing but tyrants who deserve obscene gestures. You're not tyrants, Jake said. Tyrants use force. You just use arrogance and bureaucracy to keep everyone else down. It's more polite, but the effect is the same. And this is your solution? A crude insult visible across dozens of star systems? Jake shrugged. We tried polite. Polite didn't work. Sometimes you need to speak in a language everyone understands. And there's nothing more universal than this gesture. Senna looked back at the monument. Some in my government want to destroy it. Send a fleet, blast it to pieces, make an example of humanity. They'd lose ships trying, Jake said calmly. We're prepared to defend it. Is a war really worth it? Just to erase a monument? That's what I told them, Senna said quietly. That's why I'm here. I need to go back and explain what I've seen. Help them understand that humanity isn't going to back down, and that starting a war over this would be foolish. Why help us? Jake asked suspiciously. Senna's four eyes met his. Because you're right. My people have become arrogant. We've forgotten what it's like to struggle for recognition. We treat younger species the way our ancestors were treated millions of years ago, and we tell ourselves it's for their own good. But it's not. It's just easier to keep others down than to accept them as equals. She gestured at the monument. This is offensive, yes. Crude, absolutely. But it's also honest. You could have built a beautiful statue, something artistic that, let us pretend you were still trying to earn our approval. Instead, you built this. You made it impossible for us to ignore or misunderstand how you feel. And maybe that's what we needed. Jake felt a flicker of respect for the young ambassador. What will you tell your government? The truth. That humanity has drawn a line, and crossing it would cost us more than it's worth. That we need to accept a new reality where we're not the only ones who matter. That the galaxy is changing, and we can either change with it or become irrelevant. They won't like hearing that, Jake said. No, Senna agreed. They won't. But it's still true. Back on Earth, the monument's activation had an unexpected effect on human culture. People felt proud in a way they hadn't felt in generations. For 200 years, humanity had been the newcomers, the ones who didn't quite belong. Now they had announced to the entire galaxy that they refused to accept that status anymore. Songs were written about the monument. Artists painted it. Children learned about it in school. It became a symbol not just of defiance, but of self-respect. Linda Hayes, watching all this unfold from her office in Geneva, felt a deep satisfaction. She had spent 20 years trying to win respect through diplomacy. She had failed because the game was rigged from the start. The Council would never respect humanity as long as humans kept asking for permission to matter. Now, permission was no longer relevant. Humanity had announced its importance whether the galaxy liked it or not. 3 months after the activation, something remarkable happened. Year 3 of Operation Resolute brought the first major challenge. Karen Price stood on the observation deck of the construction platform, watching as massive plasma drills carved into the surface of KR-229. The dwarf planet was slowly taking shape, but they were behind schedule. We need to speed up the excavation, she told her team during the morning briefing. At our current pace, we'll finish in 13 years, not 10. Danny Cole pulled up the resource charts. The problem is the density. KR-229 has a higher metal content than we expected. It's good for structural stability, but bad for drilling speed. We're burning through equipment faster than supply ships can replace it. Karen rubbed her temples. They had known this would be difficult, but theory was always cleaner than reality. What if we use thermal expansion? Heat sections of the planet, let them crack naturally, then clear the debris. That could work for the rough shaping, said Sophie Turner, the team's chief physicist. But we'd need more fusion generators. The ones we have are already at capacity. Then we ask Earth for more generators, Karen said. This project has full government backing. They'll send what we need. What Earth sent was even better than more equipment. They sent more people. Thousands of volunteers signed up when President Cross made a public call for workers. People wanted to be part of something historic. They didn't know exactly what was being built out in deep space, but they knew it was important. The new arrivals included miners from asteroid colonies, welders from orbital shipyards, and engineers from every nation on Earth. They came in waves, filling the construction platform to capacity. The work went faster, but managing so many people created new problems. We have 17 different languages being spoken on the drilling crews, Danny complained. Half the instructions get lost in translation. Karen solved that by implementing a visual system. Color codes, hand signals, and clear diagrams that anyone could understand regardless of language. It was simple but effective. Within a month, productivity increased by 30%. The shape was becoming unmistakable now. Anyone looking at KR-229 could see what it was meant to be. A massive hand, fingers curled except for one. The middle finger extended upward, pointing toward the stars where the Galactic Council held its power. Workers started calling it the finger in casual conversation. Some people thought it was funny. Others thought it was the most beautiful thing they had ever seen. Everyone agreed it was satisfying. My grandfather spent 40 years trying to get the council to approve trade agreements, one welder told Karen. They rejected him every time. Said humanity wasn't ready. When I heard about this project, I knew I had to be part of it. This is for him. Stories like that were common. Almost everyone working on the project had a personal reason for being there. The council's arrogance had touched millions of human lives. This was their answer. Year 5 brought the next crisis. A merchant ship captain named Martin Gray was traveling through the sector when he saw the construction site. Martin was a trader who dealt with multiple species, and he was friendly with several Vicari merchants. When he realized what humanity was building, he immediately understood the implications. He also saw a business opportunity. Martin sent a coded message to one of his Vicari contacts, offering to sell information about a significant human construction project. The price he asked was enough to make him rich for life. The Vicari intelligence services were very interested. They paid Martin's price and got detailed scans of the construction site, including images that clearly showed the monument's shape. When the information reached the Vicari homeworld, it caused an uproar. The Vicari High Command convened an emergency session. They sent urgent messages to their allies in the Galactic Council. Within days, everyone in galactic politics knew what humanity was building. The Council's response was predictable. They declared the monument an insult to galactic dignity and demanded that construction stop immediately. When humanity refused, they threatened economic sanctions. President Cross gave a press conference from Geneva. His message was broadcast across human space and transmitted to every major species in the galaxy. The Galactic Council has demanded we cease construction of our monument, Cross said calmly. They claim it insults galactic dignity. I have a simple response to that claim. For 200 years, the Council has insulted humanity's dignity. They have called us primitive. They have denied us basic rights. They have treated us like children who should be grateful for any attention at all. We tried diplomacy. We tried patience. We tried following their rules. Nothing worked. So now we're making a statement in a language everyone can understand. He paused, looking directly into the camera. The monument will be completed as planned. It will stand in human sovereign space, positioned where the Council cannot avoid seeing it. If they don't like it, they're welcome to avoid our territory entirely. We won't miss them. The speech went viral. Humans everywhere celebrated Cross's defiance, but it also had an unexpected effect on other species. The Torathi were a reptilian species from the Gamma Quadrant. They had been members of the Galactic Council for 3,000 years, but always as junior partners. The Vicari controlled their trade routes and their voting rights. When the Torathi government heard about humanity's monument, their reaction surprised everyone. They issued a public statement praising humanity's creative expression of sovereignty and calling the monument a legitimate artistic statement. It was carefully worded to avoid directly insulting the Vakari. But the message was clear. The Tarathi were tired of being pushed around too. Other species began speaking up. The Million Collective, an insectoid species that had been excluded from major council decisions for centuries, sent a message directly to Earth. We like your style. Not everyone was supportive. The Vakari Empire and their closest allies condemned the project in the strongest terms. Some species stayed neutral, not wanting to pick sides. But the galaxy was watching, and humanity's defiance was inspiring others to question the Council's authority. Back at the construction site, the work continued. Year 6 brought the completion of the basic structure. The hand was fully formed, every finger carved and shaped. Now came the delicate work of reinforcement and finishing. Karen's team installed massive support beams inside the structure, creating a skeleton of compressed titanium that would keep the monument stable for centuries. They added the gravitational stabilizers that would keep it in position, despite solar winds and passing ships. They built the control systems that would allow small adjustments to its orbit. The fusion reactor was the hardest part. It needed to be powerful enough to make the monument visible from light years away, but stable enough to run for decades without maintenance. Sophie Turner led that project personally, working with a team of the best physicists humanity had. The reactor design is sound, Sophie told Karen during a progress review, but we've never built one this large before. We won't know if it works until we turn it on. And if it doesn't work? Karen asked. Sophie grinned. Then we'll have built the galaxy's most expensive middle finger that nobody can see. But it'll work. I've checked everything 3 times. Year 8 brought another Vakari attempt to interfere. This time they sent a full battle fleet, 20 ships with enough firepower to level a small colony. Admiral Jake Morrison met them at the perimeter of human space with 30 human warships. The standoff lasted for 3 days. Both fleets held position, neither side willing to fire the first shot. The entire galaxy watched, wondering if this would finally trigger the war everyone feared. On the 3rd day, the Vakari fleet commander opened a communication channel with Jake. Admiral, we have orders to inspect the construction site. We do not wish for conflict. Jake's response was simple. Then leave. This is human territory. You have no authority here. The Council has authority everywhere, the Vakari commander insisted. Not here, Jake said firmly. Not anymore. You can leave peacefully, or we can have a fight that neither of us will enjoy. Your choice. The Vakari commander made a calculation. His fleet was powerful, but the humans were defending their own territory and were clearly prepared to fight. Even if the Vakari won, the losses would be significant. And for what? To see a monument that everyone already knew about. The Vakari fleet withdrew. It was a small victory, but an important one. Humanity had faced down the most powerful military in the galaxy and hadn't blinked. Year 10 arrived faster than anyone expected. The monument was nearly complete. The structure was perfect, the systems were all functional, and the fusion reactor was ready for activation. All that remained was the final polish and the preparation for the activation ceremony. Karen Price walked the exterior of the monument one last time, checking every detail. The surface had been smoothed and polished until it gleamed. The finger was absolutely perfect, extending exactly 3,247 kilometers from base to tip. The proportions were correct. The message was unmistakable. It's beautiful, Danny said, floating beside her in his work suit. Karen had to agree. Despite the crude nature of the gesture it represented, the monument itself was a masterpiece of engineering. It proved that humanity could accomplish anything if properly motivated. 10 years, she said softly. 10 years of work, and we actually did it.